to Mind Escape. Are you ready?
Are you ready to escape your mind?
All right, folks, welcome back to Mind Escape. I am your host, Mike. I think this is episode 316. Yeah, 316. On the last episode, I talked about my recent brush or second recent brush with death. And before we get started, there's a couple things I forgot about because I did such a short episode just to update everybody what was going on. There was some weird stuff that happened. One thing was, so earlier in the day, before I went to the hospital, before I even started bleeding and, having a bad time, I told my wife, earlier that day, I've been having, weird dreams, and I think I'm going to die, and it was, super morbid, and that's not normally how I am or anything that I would normally say. And I completely forgot about this, by the way, last time we were doing, or the last episode I did again when I was describing this. But I was thinking about it, and yeah, there was some weirdness. I did have a feeling that something bad was going to happen. I had been having dreams similar to stuff I've read in some Carl Jung books. So I thought that was kind of weird. Some sort of maybe, I don't want to say precognition, but just a knowing of something bad was was abound, I guess you should say. So there was that. And I also want to thank my wife, because without her, she acted fast again. Without her, I probably wouldn't be here. So 2 times now, she's pretty much saved my life. So obviously I love her. She's my wife, but I just wanted to thank her publicly because I think I forgot to do that last time. So tonight we're going to be discussing, as I mentioned last episode, I have a bunch of these slideshow presentation style episodes that I've prepared in the past and either forgot about or we didn't get to or we had guests on or whatever. So tonight I thought we would finish up the What Was Soma series. For anybody that hasn't been following, it's been a while. I think episode 187 or 180 something. Part 1, we had Chris Bennett on, who is a cannabis historian and author, who his hypothesis is that Soma, was cannabis, or Soma and Homa. If you don't know what Homa is, we'll get into everything in a second. I have a slideshow ready, tons of information ready to roll. If you're listening, you might want to check this out on YouTube. We also have video episodes on Spotify, because it's slide heavy, and there'll be pictures and stuff and references and stuff like that. If you want to just listen to, that's totally cool. So we'll be going through that. Part 1, again, the hypothesis from Chris Bennett was that it was cannabis. And then part 2, I also had on academic and author Matthew Clark, and he believes that Soma and Homa were ayahuasca, Middle Eastern ayahuasca analogs. And he makes a compelling case as well. I think that those are probably, I gravitated towards those because they seemed like the top explanations from everything that I looked through. One thing that I came away with is kind of my own take on all of this, which we will discuss later on. Something that I found, or just my perception of things. But yeah, so I linked both of those, part 1 and part 2, down below. So again, part 1 is heavy on the idea that cannabis was Soma and Homa, and part 2 is heavy on the idea of DMT, or a Middle Eastern ayahuasca analog, was Soma and Homa. So this is part 3. We're also going to go through all the other options because there are a bunch of other things that people don't normally talk about, or things that I've seen or I've even debated with people on Reddit and other forums. And, I mean, that's how you find things out too. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know about that I came across through researching this stuff. And, some of them don't seem like likely candidates, but interesting reasons why people think that nonetheless. So we're going to talk about all that. And the best way to support Mind Escape is just to click the Linktree link down below. We've got our documentary on our Linktree, which is As Within, So Without, From UFOs to DMT, which is a look at the consciousness aspect of weird experiences, and kind of in the title, you'll get, the gist of it. And we have a merch store. We have Patreon. We actually have, I think, a Patreon segment we did with Matthew Clark after the episode we did with him. So there's some stuff regarding these same topics on our Patreon as well. And I'm just trying to think. If you like what we're doing, leave us a nice review too. We'd appreciate it. So, let's get started here. So, what was Soma? Part 3. What was Soma? To this day, it is one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Everyone from academics to psychedelic researchers to spiritual leaders have come up with different theories as to what the ancient psychoactive concoction was made of. Drinking Soma is said to help one attain the light, immortality, and commune with the gods. The goal of this podcast series, which I mentioned, is to lay out all the credible information and research and let you, the viewer or listener, determine what theory is most likely. Leave a comment after the video, or, if you're listening, you can leave comments now on Spotify. Leave it on our YouTube. Let me know what you think after watching this. Is there something you lean heavy, or more heavy towards, I guess I should say. Leave a comment, and at the end, like I said, I'll let you know kind of where I stand on this whole thing, and after I've done all this research and interviews and stuff, what I think's going on. All right, so here's a little bit of history. As you can see there, I made a map. A lot of this stuff is figured out linguistically. There's not a whole lot of physical evidence in terms of like they have found some jars and different things with concoctions of ephedra and opium and cannabis residue on things and things like that. But there's no set tons of evidence for this stuff. So that's kind of, I think, what makes it so difficult and why it's so hard to figure out. A lot of it's linguistics, and a lot of it has to come with, or come through the process of linguistics through migration. So here's what we're talking about. So on the map here, you can see there, up where the Indo-European civilizations start to move more east. So here, I'll read this. I wrote some captions for some of these things. The origin of Soma comes from the Indo-Iranian migrations. The migration theory is the eastern descendants of the Indo-Europeans migrated from the region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, as shown to the left. Those Indo-European people then migrated east around the top of the Caspian Sea, which is now modern-day Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, to form what are known as the Andronovo and the Shintasta cultures, which are considered Indo-Iranian and dated to roughly 2000 BC. During the Indo-Iranian migration, it is believed that the word Sauma, spelled S-A-U-M-A, which is meant to press, was also created along with rituals. The Indo-Iranian languages started to diverge starting around 2000 BC, which happened in a two-wave migration pattern proposed by Burrow in 1973 and Parpola in 1999. The first wave break-off became what's known as the Indo-Aryans, which settled in what is now like northwest India. Sometime between 1800 and 1500 BC, the Indo-Aryans created the Vedic Sanskrit language, which resulted in the Rig Veda. So the Rig Veda is like known as kind of like the earliest religious text there is that we know about. So these people, again, migrated in this pattern, probably at some point were together and then they break off. In terms of going down, migrating down there, you can see, again, the Indo-Aryans going towards northwest India and the Indo-Iranian people ending up in what is known as Iran now. Again, the Rig Veda is the first religious text. So the Indo-Iranians split off and settling in Iran. That was like roughly 1400 to 1100 BC. The Iranian people ended up creating the Avestan, which is Old Persian or, a language, which then they created the Avesta, which is their religious text. So it would be like kind of their version of the Rig Veda. It's interesting that both of these cultures that split off, they have their own sacred text. One's got the Rig Veda, one's got the Avesta, but they're both associated with entheogens and psychoactive compounds. In the ancient scripture of Zoroastrianism is one of the oldest religions still practiced to this day. So, so Zoroastrianism is connected to the Avesta, if you're unaware. And there's a lot more you can look into that, but that's just kind of, I wanted to give people a basic breakdown and kind of what you're thinking. Now, people opposed to this, there are people that are opposed to this idea. I think the Vedic stuff coming from the Indo-European migrations, even though linguistically it tracks, they claim more of like a Indian nationalist view of it, that they've been there forever, even though there's kind of different cultural things happening. And again, it's we'll get into more of that here in a second. Okay, so here's the Vedic references. What was Soma? First used in the Rig Veda, the word Soma is used to describe the elixir, the plant, and the god. So it's three things. It's an elixir, it's a plant, and it's a god. The Vedic Sanskrit term Soma translates to distill, extract, and sprinkle. Researchers say that Soma references in the Rig Veda, they correlate to light and immortality and suggest that it was most likely some sort of entheogenic substance. If you don't know what the word entheogen means, it's like a religious context of using psychedelic or psychoactive compounds, along with the other supporting evidence. Ralph Griffith translated the Rig Veda Mandala hymn 8.48.3 to read, we have drunk Soma and became immortal. We have attained the light, the gods discovered. Now what may foemen's malice do harm to us? What, O mortal, man's deception? Also in the Rig Veda, Mandala 8 hymn 8.79.2-6 reads, he covers the naked and heals all who are sick. The blind man sees. This kind of sounds familiar if you're not familiar with Christianity. The lame man steps forth. Let those who seek find in what they seek. Let them receive the treasure. Let them find what was lost before. Let him push forward the man of truth. Rig Veda Mandala 8 hymn 8.2 or 8.82.25. For thee, O Lord of light, are shed these Soma drops. The grass is strewn. Bring Indra to his worshippers. May Indra give thee skill and the light of heaven, wealth of votary. And the priests who praise him, laud ye him. Other Soma references can be found in the Mandala 9.4, 9.5, 9.8, 9.10, and 9.42. Mandala 9 of the Rig Veda, as the Soma Mandala, is comprised of 114 hymns, some of which are orally preserved and that date back to the 3rd century millennium BC. Okay, so there's a lot there. I would point out that the language that's being used, now we got to put this in context. These are ancient times. They definitely spoke differently. The language were definitely different. However, things like drink, to become immortal, attaining light, communing with the gods and things of that, becoming immortal. I mean, you have to wonder. I mean, it definitely sounds to me like something psychoactive or, psychedelic. There's people that argue against that. And again, we'll go through all the different candidates for what this could be. But to me, as somebody that's used entheogens and psychedelics in the past, it's kind of clear to me that these people were definitely using some sort of mind-altering substance to attain these states. So let's keep going. Physical descriptions. And this is where this becomes important, because I think you'll start to see similarities in things, differences in things, and I'll kind of get to where I'm going with all this through this process as well. So physical descriptions. What was Soma? The stalks of the plants were pressed with stones. The elixir was strained through wool, and it was mixed with milk and water. It is said to be a plant that grows in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Well, I mean, we know a couple things that grow in the Hindu Kush Mountains. One of them would be cannabis, and another one would be opium. It is yellow and green with long stalks. That sounds like cannabis to me. It was associated with the warrior god Indra, who would drink it before battle, so it may have been a stimulant. So there's some people that do think that this is a stimulant, like ephedra, and we'll go more into that in a bit. But there's a little bit of debate. Is it a is it a 5-H2A receptor psychedelic, or is it something more stimulant? There's some people that go as far as to say it might even be some plant that has gone extinct or just or lost to time or the knowledge of it or whatever. So other references to light and immortality, again, suggest that it was probably an entheogen. In the Artha Veda, it is considered the king of medicinal herbs. So you have to wonder, what is this thing that's known? The Vedic culture is famous for understanding the flora and the landscape and using medicinal things. And to call it the king of medicinal herbs, it's got to be pretty potent. It was also usually purchased from traders. So there you have a little bit. So the Hindu Kush Mountain thing, and then the purchase from traders. Maybe when people migrated, they, because I don't know how prevalent cannabis is naturally there, but maybe it's something they had to get if it wasn't readily available or something along those lines. Okay. So what was Homa? So now we know Homa. So as I mentioned before, Soma is what from the Indo-Iranian breakoff, the Indo-Aryans, which, migrated into northwest India, created Soma and the Rig Veda. Now you have the Indo-Iranian breakoff with the Indo-Iranians, or the Iranians, who have become Iranians now. Their version was called Homa, and sometimes it's spelled H-A-O-M-A. I might have that in here sometimes, and sometimes it's spelled H-O-O-M-A. So they're very similar, and this is what I'm about to show you. So the Avesta references. The Avesta, again, is the holy book, or the ancient text for the Iranian people. So Homa is a divine entheogenic plant and drink in Zoroastrianism and later in Persian cultures. The Avestan term, so Avestan is Old Persian, or their original language. Homa is a cognate of the Vedic Soma, and there are many other terms that are similar between the two cultures dating back to before they migrated to the two different regions. As mentioned above, Sanskrit Soma and Avestan Homa are derived from the Proto-Indo-Iranian word sauma, which meant to press. Homa is prepared by pounding the plant and then drinking it. Soma and Homa are also personified as divine beings. Homa is said to have appeared to prophet Zoroaster at the time of pressing. The Homa plant produced essential ingredient for the ritual parahoma, the ritual drink parahoma. Yasna 9. Okay, so before when I was saying mandala, those are all like the way that the Rig Veda is separated. These are called yasna. This is yasna 9.22 or 9.22 from the Avesta. Says Homa grants speed and strength to warriors, excellent and righteous sons to those giving birth, spiritual power and knowledge to those who apply themselves to the study of the Nasks. Yasna 9.22, Heoma is righteous and furthers righteousness, is wise and gives insight. Heoma was considered the first priest installed by Ahura Mazda. We've talked about Ahura Mazda in the past, which is the god of Zoroastrianism. It's like that winged disc god that you see in a lot of their iconography or symbolism. Ahura Mazda was the creator of the highest god in Zoroastrianism, and Ahura Mazda translates to wise lord. Okay. So now we get to the physical description. So we looked at the physical descriptions of Soma. Now we're looking at the physical descriptions of Homa. Was it similar, the same? Let's take a look. Physical descriptions of what was Homa. The plant had stems, roots, and branches. That comes from Yasna 10.5. It is golden green. That's pretty similar to the Soma one. That's Yasna 9.16. It can be pressed, very similar, Yasna 9.1, 9.2. It is tall, Yasna 10.22, and Veni Dead, I don't know what that is, 19.19. It is fragrant, Yasna 10.4. I mean, cannabis is very fragrant. I can't even speak tonight. Fragrant. So something to think about. I mean, I guess a lot of flowers are too, but I mean, what's more fragrant than cannabis that I can think of? Like like if you came across a big field of cannabis in the Hindu Kush mountains, it would be pretty fragrant, I would think. It grows on the mountains, swiftly spreading apart on many paths. Yasna 9.26, 10.3-4. To the gorges and the abysses, Yasna 10.11, and on the ranges, Yasna 10.12. It has a plant asu, Yasna 9.16. The term asu is only used in conjunction with a description of Homa and does not have an established translation. It refers to the stock according to R. Gordon Wasson. R. Gordon Wasson, somebody we've talked about in the past, definitely a psychedelic pioneer, but definitely got a lot of stuff wrong too, especially early on. So, if you don't know who R. Gordon Wasson is, you can go look him up. All right, biological effects of Homa. Again, this is all just sourced from these direct ancient texts. Now, these are translations. I don't speak Old Persian. I don't speak, I can't read Sanskrit, so I'm relying on the translations of others. But that being said, there's a lot of evidence, again, for the language and the linguistics and, the etymology and how it evolves over time and kind of how we get here. So, all right, so this is the biological effects of what Homa was. It is physically strengthening. Yasna 9.17, 9.22, and 9.27. It stimulates alertness and awareness. Yasna 9.17, 9.22, 10.13. It furthers healing. Yasna 9.16-17, 9.19, 10.8, and 10.9. It furthers sexual arousal. Yasna 9.13, -15, and 19.22. It is nourishing. Yasna 9.4, 10.20, and is most nutritious for the soul. Yasna 9.16. Mildly intoxicating extract can be consumed without negative side effects. Yasna 10.8. In terms of cannabis, I think that I think the cannabis thing just makes a lot of sense. And in fact, when I typed in I was playing with Chat GPT earlier, and I was typing in all sorts of different combinations and giving it different prompts. A lot of these images are from DALL-E or Chat GPT, and a lot of them brought up similar looking plants when I described, and I said use the exact descriptions from the Rig Veda or use the exact descriptions for the Avesta. A lot of them came up with what looked like cannabis plants or something very similar. So again, not saying it's exact, but based on the actual descriptions and the translations, it's just something that comes up. And so Stoic mentions the use of milk, which is correct. So like anybody that's ever played alchemist with cannabis knows that you need a fat when you're dealing with cannabis. So whether it's milk, butter, whatever it may be. Now, when we had Chris Bennett on for part 1, and he's the biggest proponent for cannabis being Soma and Homa, he makes the argument that they could probably be decarboxylized through the process of just being like in an arid environment, the heat from the sun or whatever. So you don't need to decarb it, if you will, in that way. Now, I think if you're going to do, you still probably would get a better effect, I would think, that if you still mixed it with the fat. That's just my opinion from personal experiences with these things. But I mean, I guess there's different ways to do it. But thanks for the comment, Stoic. That was a good point. So those are the biological effects of Homa. Now, some of them do sound very stimulant-y, but I mean, I don't know about any of you, but some cannabis strains can be very stimulant-y. There's also suggestions, as I mentioned before, that it could have been a cannabis ephedra mixture. It could have been cannabis ephedra and opium. There's a lot of different things regarding, or a lot of different options, I should say. Okay, so now we get into, I described each of those in the break off, and obviously they're very similar, not just through linguistics, but descriptions too. Now we get to what are the similarities between Soma and Homa. All right, so both are referenced as plants. So they're both plants, elixirs, and are both personified as divine beings. Both have medicinal properties. Both are yellow, gold, or green. Again, very cannabis. Both are derived from the Indo-Iranian word salma, which meant to press. Now, yeah, you would need to press like the stalks or the buds if it's cannabis. I mean, I guess if it's any plant, really. I mean, because you're trying to get the alkaloids and the juices and everything out of these things, so you would need to press it for sure. Both are being described as being drank before battle and assisting warriors. So that's the big one. That one is the one that stands out to most people that think it's ephedra, because they're saying, why would you can't take traditional psychedelics or anything like that and feel like strong or ready to go into battle. That's why people really push the stimulant thing. But again, I would beg to differ. A low dose of mushroom or a low dose of some psychoactive compounds, you can definitely achieve stimulant-like effects, especially if it's not as potent. I don't know. We've bolstered everything up from cannabis to psychedelics. People are growing mushrooms as strong as you can grow. I mean, there's things happening now where we've manipulated all this flora and fungi and everything where we can get the most out of it. I don't know if they were doing the same thing, but let's just say they were picking what was, available to them naturally. I would assume it's not as potent, right? So, that's something to think about as well. All right, so both are associated with rituals. Both describe entheogenic effects, light and immortality. Both were extracted from plants and mixed with other things. Both grow in the mountains, but their origins are heaven. That one's an interesting one because what does that even mean? I mean, they're saying that it's coming from somewhere else? It's a divine plant, obviously, is the suggestion, but both had stalks and that were pressed with stone. So that goes back to the origin, the Indo-European. So I don't think that these two different groups just invented these things when they got there. I think this is something that obviously probably goes back to Indo-European civilizations, and that was inherited, modified, changed slightly, through migrations and linguistics and, what was available to them and stuff. So that's just my opinion on that, but I think that's important to keep in mind. Okay, here's some more similarities. Both are described as plants, but also trees that grow in the mountains. Both are described as producing entheogenic states, but also stimulant-like effects. In the Rig Veda, it was usually obtained through traders, and in the Vesta, it was gathered by women. So maybe there was trading going on. Maybe it was available to the people of Iran or that region, and they traded to give it to the people of Northwest India. I don't know, or vice versa. Boyce in 1975 stated that Homa is said to have had many different kinds. So that's interesting too. What does that mean? Many different kinds. If we're talking about, is it strains? Is it completely different plants altogether? Like, what are we talking here? That one's one that's a little confusing. Homa is found in the plural form many times in the Avesta. So that just verifies what Boyce said, which is that they're describing multiple different things. So it could be different plants or varieties. And I think that that's one of the main points for Matthew Clark is like, look, you can, with all you need is an MAOI, and there's a lot of things that have DMT in it. So as long as you have that I can't even speak. I can't even talk tonight. Anyways, that MAOI, and as long as you have that, and then you combine it with something that has DMT, like a phalaris grass or some acacia variety or something like that, you could achieve that. And I think that that's what part of his research was. So let's talk about the top candidates for Soma. As I mentioned early on, Cannabis Historian, and I go with this one because I think it is the most reasonable explanation. Like if I had to do like Occam's razor on this whole thing based on everything I've read, people I've talked to and everything like that, it just, for me, it seems most likely that it's cannabis, or at least started out as cannabis. Again, maybe they start to migrate and it's not as available or whatever. But that's, to me, the descriptions and everything, that's where I lean towards if I'm picking like a favorite. But I also liked Matthew Clark's book. I think it's called Botanical Ecstasies. But he's an academic and an author, and his hypothesis is that Soma and Homa were concoctions that resulted in a Middle Eastern ayahuasca analog using Syrian rue or Peganum harmala as the MAOI, and then you have, as I mentioned, phalaris grass or local plants that have DMT alkaloids in them. My personal hypothesis, and I'll just get this out of the way first, or I guess before we get into all the other candidates, because this is, I just want to make it clear, like, I think these are the two most likely, but we'll go through the other ones because, like I said, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe somebody has something cool to add to that. Maybe, whatever. But I think it's important to go over because we still didn't get to a lot of other stuff that you'll see in a second. But my personal hypothesis after doing all these interviews and talking with researchers and doing my own research is that Soma and Homa may have started out as cannabis or ephedra or ayahuasca analog or a mixture of any one of those. And that through the migrations took place, as I mentioned, stuff wasn't locally available anymore. So they either had to get it from a trader, or maybe it just didn't grow there, or they had to improvise. And so my hypothesis is that Homa and Soma are just rituals that are accompanied by a psychoactive compound. It doesn't matter what the psychoactive compound was. It's the ritual that matters. And as long as you can get into that altered state, I think that was the point. But again, just my hypothesis, and there is differences between the descriptions and everything like that. So that's just kind of where I lean on that. I don't know. Again, I don't have like a candidate that's not those two that makes more sense than those two. So, but I will say that through reading everything, and I know I've talked to Chris, and Chris is pretty heavy on the cannabis, and Matthew was heavy on his idea, whatever. I just think that the idea of the ritual was more important than the actual entheogen. The entheogen, they probably knew about cannabis. They probably knew about ephedra, the opium, and possibly DMT and MAOIs and stuff like that. But, yeah, that's kind of where I stand on that. Okay. So now we get to the first alternative candidate, and that is Amanita muscaria, also known as the fly agaric. So from the late 1960s onwards, several studies attempted to establish Soma as a psychotropic substance. Number of proposals were made, including one important one by Gordon Wasson, as I just mentioned earlier, who was an amateur mycologist who, using Vedic evidence, asserted that Soma was an inebriant and suggested that fly agaric, or Amanita muscaria, was likely the candidate. Wasson and his co-author Wendy Doniger O'Flaherty drew parallels between the Vedic descriptions and reports of the Siberian use of Amanita muscaria in shamanic rituals. And furthermore, the mountainous origin of Soma matches the habitat of the fly agaric. And discussing Soma, the Vedas do not mention any part of a flowering tree. So I think when we're talking about Gordon Wasson was the person that went down to Hualta, did the thing with Maria Sabina, got her on the cover. Was it Time or Life? I forget which one. We did a whole series with Tom Lane too, who did rituals with Maria Sabina back in the day, and wrote the book Sacred Mushroom Rituals: A Search for the Blood of Quetzalcoatl. And he, I will say, it just seemed like maybe Gordon Wasson earlier in his career or whatever had mushroom pareidolia. Like he just saw mushrooms and everything, and he was just kind of applying it to many different things, in my opinion, from reading his books and other people's work and stuff like that. In 1971, Vedic scholar John Burrow from Cambridge University rejected Wasson's theory and hypothesized Soma was ephedrine. In particular, that was an extraction from the ephedra sinica, which is a plant in that region. It is noted that it is a powerful stimulant, and that would be more plausible for preparation for warriors to go out into a battle than fly agaric, which is a depressant. Again, here you have somebody. People look at this through different lenses. You have somebody saying, oh, look, this is a warrior going into battle. It has to be a stimulant or something that's creating some sort of illusion of power, and then disregarding or discounting any sort of psychedelic, pretty much. This was also contradicted in 1974 by irinologist Ilya Gravich, who determined that in small doses, Amanita muscaria was indeed a stimulant. In any case, since the weapon that Indra uses, called the Vajra, which emits lightning bolts in battles, if you've seen the Vajra, it kind of looks like a three-dimensional infinity symbol kind of a looking thing. I don't know I don't have a picture of it, but that's just kind of what it appears like to me. And it could not have been physical one. So this researcher is saying that indeed Amanita muscaria could create these effects, and that these battles that were happening with these guys were happening internally and not something that was externally happening in the world. J.P. Mallory rejects Wasson's argument, and that the absence of the Vedic descriptions of plant parts point to a fungus, Since the Vedas do not describe a plant from which is extracted at all, he explains the references in the mountains as a metaphor, recalling Soma's lofty origins. So I don't like this one as a candidate. I've done Amanita. I know people that have had great success with it, love it, but I've never had any like transformational or, I think one time I had some weird dreams. It made me like tired and I had some weird dreams. But again, you got to be careful because Amanita muscaria has ibotanic acid, so you have to make sure you decarboxylate it. So that's something to think about if you start getting interested in dabbling. Just be careful. So that would be the one that, again, I don't like this as an option, but it's an option nonetheless. Psilocybe cubensis mushrooms. This one's going to get weird. I'm going to go back and forth between a couple slides here. So this one's interesting. So in 2009, Russian archaeologists found an embroidered textile in a forest in the Mongolian gravesite, which was believed. It was believed to be spun in Syria, but embroidered in northwest India. Roughly 2,000 years old, the embroidery features ancient Zoroastrian ceremony involving a mushroom that appears to be Psilocybe cubensis, and it depicts two men standing on opposing sides of an altar with fire, with holding the mushroom up over the fire. Now, the interesting thing to me is that it's a Mongolian gravesite, but it's spun in Syria. So northwest India is where the Rig Veda comes from. But you also have them talking about a Zoroastrian ceremony. So it's a Zoroastrian ceremony in northwest India. Again, the connection between Soma and Homa. Were they friends, traders? They obviously come from similar groups of people. Like what was going on there. So I'm going to skip ahead. I'll read the rest of this in a second, but I'm going to skip ahead to the next slide. All right, so here's the tapestry. Here's a picture of the tapestry I was just describing from what the Russian archaeologists found in 2009. You can't really see it here, but I'm going to zoom in. So there you see like a whole, it almost looks like, the lineup you see on most ancient texts and walls of like a bunch of groups of people standing in a line, whether it's ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. You have a bunch of noblemen, people on horses, that kind of a thing, and standing in a line. And then at the end there, you have two guys holding something up over a fire. So let's see here. We'll go, and this is zooming in. So now I zoomed in. So now you see the two men holding up what appears to be a mushroom over a fire. Now, take that for what you will. I can't look at that and be like, that's for sure Psilocybe cubensis. It kind of looks like a big Amanita, but not the right color. It looks like a mix between a Psilocybe and an Amanita, if I'm being honest. Like the size and the shape of, and you're not going to get a ton of detail. This thing's so old. I mean, it's kind of amazing that they were able to weave this tapestry like this and get these figures in there. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Leave a comment below in terms of like, does that look like Psilocybe? Does that look like Amanita to you? It doesn't have the colors of Amanita. Everything else is red. They could have easily made that red with white spots, but it's not. It's like a tan color. And who knows what the original colors were because it's so old. There's just a lot of things going on there. But I'll go back. So again, there's the scrolled out view of it, so you can see underneath them holding that there's like a little fire pit thing there, or like an altar. Okay, so we're gonna go back to there. So again, that was something that the Russian archaeologists found very interesting. If nothing else, fits the right area, time, and everything. So definitely something that I was interested in when I saw that pop up. Okay. Terence McKenna in his book Food of the Gods, great book, highly recommend you read it, took issue with Amanita muscaria theory and suggests that psilocybin containing Psilocybe cubensis mushrooms, as Soma, he discounts it, the the Amanita and really likes the idea of the psilocybe. McKenna argues that the effects of Amanita mushrooms contradict the description of the properties described in the Rig Veda. Amanita muscaria mushrooms have properties that are arguably more deliriant than psychedelic, as I mentioned before from my own experiences. McKenna cited other cultures who use or who used to use and venerate psychedelic plants and drugs in religious ceremonies such as the Shavan de Huantar in Peru, or Huantar. Again, we get back to Gordon Wasson. Gordon Wasson, who initially suggested that, so this is where he changes his mind later on. Gordon Wasson, who initially suggested that the Soma plant was Amanita muscaria. Again, these aren't plants, they're fungi. I don't know why this is written like this, but described Psilocybe cubensis as easily identified and gathered in India. Eventually hypothesized along McKenna that Psilocybe cubensis was perhaps the true identity of Soma. McKenna and Wasson both unsuccessfully attempted to use Amanita muscaria to achieve the state of consciousness conducive with the development of the religion. Let's see here. Stoic says that's a hero dose. That one mushroom is huge. I agree. Reminds me of one of my, in high school, I saw, they were called the other ones at the time. Now you have Dead and Company and Grateful Dead, but at the time the other ones were the Grateful Dead just minus Jerry. And you had Robert Hunter come out, like, set break and play his arch top guitar and sing and do like poems and stuff. So that was the other ones. It was everybody but Jerry. And I remember eating this huge cap. I mean, I think me and my buddy split it, but it was like the size, it was like a quarter, but it was just a cap. It was like an acorn cap. It was massive and it was bone dry. So this thing was massive. But yeah, that kind of reminded me of that. Ended up having the Palace of Auburn Hills, which is where we saw it at the time. The whole crowd turned into one gelatinous goo. And yeah, crazy show, crazy experiences. Okay, so the ninth mandala of the Rig Veda suggests that the cow is the embodiment of Soma, which provides support for McKenna's theory because Psilocybe cubensis is known to grow on cow dung. Yes, that is true. A study by Griffiths concluded that psilocybin is capable of producing mystical experiences. These experiences may be conducive to the development of a religious ritual. It is worth noting that the experience of death and rebirth can be brought on by psychedelic drugs, but is also a central concept to Hinduism. I mean, yeah, duh, but I mean, I've had lots of experiences with probably the most out of any of the psychedelics and a lot more than most people with psilocybin. And yeah, I mean, I don't like none of the descriptions in the Avesta or the Rig Veda match with like a fungi, whether it be psilocybe or amanita. So I don't like, I love this compound. It's my favorite compound. I would love to be like, yeah, this is it. This makes sense. The cow dung, the symbiotic relationship, the whole thing. But I just don't think it's it. Now, were they aware of it? I don't know. But I mean, again, it could even tie into my own hypothesis, which is that it doesn't matter what the entheogen or the compound is. It's the ritual. So it's the combination of the ritual with the entheogen. So there's the one more time. There's the tapestry with the giant mushroom. Okay, Peganum harmala, or aka Syrian rue. In 1989, David Flattery, who is with linguistic support from Martin Schwartz, concentrated on Iranian Homa. The two, again, paid particular attention to hallucinogenic properties that may be interpreted from the text. They discounted ephedra because they could not observe Zoroastrian priests becoming intoxicated. They concluded that it was therefore neither likely that it was an ephedra, that ephedra was the substitute for sauma, nor was sauma itself, and that ephedrine and pseudoephedrine alkaloids extracted from ephedra had to be mixed with the extract or some other plant to achieve desired effects. So they're saying that through their research, they don't think it's ephedra because you would achieve a much more interesting state than, like stimulants. It depends, the stimulants I've done in the past, somebody might not even know there's anything wrong with you, or you're just a little hyper or whatever. I mean, the comments I read earlier of people attaining light, immortality, communing with the gods, I mean, those are pretty heavy statements, right? So like, it wouldn't be as simple as like kind of being like a little boosted or kind of getting a little jacked and going into battle. I think that that's where the disconnect is, but that's what they're saying there. So they're saying that you need something else. So then Flattery proposed that the second plant was Peganum harmala, or harmel, Syrian rue, or harmaline, known in Iranian language as esfand, sepand, or similar terms related to the Avestan words spenta, which is sacred or holy. Flattery considered harmel to be the real Haoma, with ephedra only being the secondary ingredient. So they're kind of talking about a little bit of a concoction themselves and mixing Syrian rue with the ephedra. I've never heard of anybody trying that. I would be interested to see what the effects are of like some sort of stimulant or specifically even ephedra and an MAOI. Other reasons for preferring Peganum harla, the identity of the Soma Homa, and the use of similar chemicals in South American cultures in a manner reminiscent of the reported role of the drink in the Indo-Iranian text, is it's being the only incense plant with hallucinogenic properties in Iran. Peganum harmala contains harmaline, which is a strong MAO inhibitor, and therefore is used as the first component in ayahuasca ceremonies in order to inhibit the metabolization of an orally administered DMT molecule, which is the second component, since the co-occurrence of DMT carrying Phalaris grass, as I mentioned earlier, and harmala were observed at Yazdi, Persepolis, Merv, and Termez. Those are all locations in Iran. The hypothesis stating that the Haoma and the Soma and Homa were biochemical Eurasian correlate of ayahuasca cannot be a priori excluded. That's what they said. Let's see here. Now we get to probably the one that everybody loves for the Eleusinian mysteries, but again, never heard of anybody actually. They can find all the ergot they want in chalices, but till somebody creates some sort of concoction that will get you there, let's say, without any neurotoxic effects, because ergot is very neurotoxic. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have some issues. So let's talk about this. So we've mentioned this many times, but in The Road to Eleusis, the authors are Gordon Wasson, Albert Hoffman, and Carl Ruck note that the similarity in preparation of the Vedic Soma and the Eleusinian mysteries, Kekian. The book hypothesizes that the source was both ergot or Claviceps purpurea. So here you have Gordon Wasson. I mean, I don't know how much of this aspect of it he contributed, but this dude's now said it was Amanita. No, then it's psilocybin mushrooms, or maybe this was before that. I forget. I don't know, but he's thrown every psychedelic into the mix, and you can do that, but it's just like, which one is it, bro? So kekian means to stir, to mix, very similar to press, mix, sprinkle, which is what the etymology of Soma was, which led to Soma. That's kind of interesting. Was an ancient Greek drink of various descriptions. Some were made mainly of water, barley, and natural occurring substances. Others were made with wine and grated cheese. It is widely believed that kekian usually refers to a psychoactive compounded brew, as in the case for the Eleusinian mysteries. Kekian was used in the climax of the Eleusinian mysteries to break a sacred fast. but is also mentioned as a favorite drink of Greek peasants. So, I mean, the other thing is 406 BC, I think. You have Alcibiades, or Alcibiades, however you want to pronounce it, profaning the Eleusinian mysteries. So this was a Greek statesman that you're not supposed to partake in the psychedelic aspect of the Eleusinian mysteries only once, but in your life, and you're supposed to do it at Eleusis, which is the greater mysteries. You're allowed to partake in that only once in your life. The lesser mysteries, I think you can do it whenever, but the greater mysteries, which involves the Kekion, you're only allowed to do once. So you have this guy who's doing it at dinner parties, and they're considering him to be profaning the Eleusinian mysteries. Kekion is mentioned in the Homeric text. The Iliad describes it as consisting of Pramnian wine, barley, grated goat's cheese, and then in the Odyssey, Circe adds that some honey and pours her magic potion into it. In the Homeric hymn to Demeter, 2:10, the goddess refuses red wine but accepts Kekion made with water, barley, and pennyroyal. There's a great, if you go on YouTube, there's a great little snip of Terence McKenna kind of speculating on the Eleusinian mysteries, and he's saying that water was an augum for that recipe, meaning that you wouldn't just put water, like it's there's something that's replaced there. You wouldn't just put water in a recipe that's like a given. So he was saying that it's an augum, but it's an interesting little diatribe he goes on nonetheless. So go check that out if you like Terence McKenna and you're interested in this topic. It was supposed to have digestive properties. Hermes recommended it to Aristophanes in Peace 7.12 to the hero who ate too much dry fruit and nuts. Aristocrats shunned it as a peasant's drink. Theophrastus depicted it in his characters as a peasant who goes to Excelsia drunk with Kekion. To solve the mystery of how many people over the years, 2 millennia, you should say, could have consistently experienced revelatory states, during the Eleusinian mysteries, it has been posited that barley, used in the Eleusinian mysteries was parasited by ergot, and then they had these obviously ergot has psychoactive properties, but again, it's also neurotoxic. So the fungus triggered intense experiences, and so that's what pretty much the premise of Road to Eleusis. And then you have Brian Murarescu more recently writing Immortality Key. He found chemical traces and evidence of ergot in chalices in Spain and different locations. I will say that, again, I've never heard of anybody creating the Kekion where it's actually psychedelic and nobody's getting sick. Like, you would know historically if people are puking their brains out or having neurotoxic effects, because it would be written about. It wouldn't be pleasant. People wouldn't talk about dying before they're dying, in the sense that, like, with great, poetic nature behind what they're saying, like, you wouldn't have that. But that's what we do have, is people kind of speaking about it positively. So it just makes you wonder, like, what were they doing to it? Was there some other step that we don't know about? I think it was hypothesized, I forget who was, that you could float hot oil on the top of it and it would remove a lot of the neurotoxic alkaloids. Again, I don't know anybody that's recreated the Kekion in a way that it's like, oh, this is what it was, kind of a thing. So I would love to see somebody try. I mean, it's probably obviously dangerous, but, for science, right? Moving on. You have Nelumbo nicifera, also known as blue lotus. Now, blue lotus is pictured in ancient Egypt, parts of the Middle East, water lily, if you don't know what it is. It's pretty common. Anyways, it's based on detailed botanical analysis of the iconography in ancient texts. Blue lotus is known as, obviously, the sacred lotus, and another candidate for Soma. The description of Soma in the Vedic texts somewhat resembles sacred lotus. Sacred lotus is a water lily that produces golden red flowers on stalks, but also blue. These flowers resemble potions of the ancient texts, comparing Soma to an arrow and the sun. Other Vedic hymns describe Soma as having a ruddy radiance, reflecting the color of the flowers of the sacred lotus. Soma is also described in the Vedic hymns as growing joint by joint, knot by knot, which is a good description of the plant and how it grows by producing procumbent shoots with nodes and internodes. Benzoquinoline alkaloids found in sacred lotus, including aporphine and proaporphine and nuciferine, are psychoactive, producing feelings of euphoria when ingested. So I know people, I've never done blue lotus. I know some people that have. They said it's kind of like a mild, sedating, interesting feeling. Not, I would say it's kind of, the way it's described kind of reminds me of Amanita, where it's like some people have these cool experiences, some people don't. It's not like eating a bag of psilocybe mushrooms where you're going in no matter what. Like, it'd be very hard to not have a crazy experience if you ate 7 grams of psilocybin mushrooms, which, again, there's people that have tried Amanita. It doesn't really do much or do anything, or makes them tired or nauseous or whatever. Then you have other people taking blue lotus that are having these great experiences, and you could see why the ancient Egyptians revered it and used it. The blue lotus is all over ancient Egypt and the hieroglyphs. It's, if you've ever seen what people call the light bulb of Dendra, or the Dendra light bulb. It's not really a light bulb, but at the base of it, that's what it is. It's a blue lotus flower, which is creating symbolism for that scene. So, they used to use it. I guess it's a great, replacement for Viagra too, is what I hear. So there's probably a lot of uses for this plant, but I don't know. This one doesn't sound like it's matching up with the what we've seen from the Rig Veda and the Avesta. So let's keep it moving. All right. This one I couldn't find a ton about, but it's Somalata. So a ritual of Soma Yajna is held today in South India. The herb which is used in Somalata is a leafless plant that grows in rocky places all over India. I couldn't really find too much on this one. It doesn't sound like it's psychoactive at all, or psychoactive in any way from what I could find. Maybe I'm wrong if somebody has other information, but this one just seems more of like a ritual. The other thing is, it says southern India, which we know the traditions of the Avesta and the Rig Veda are like northwest India, that northwest mountainous-ish region, and then also in Iran. So not really the right, not that it couldn't have migrated, but yeah. Okay. So this one, I didn't even think about this, to be honest with you, and somebody got in a fight with me on Reddit along like 3 or 4 years ago, and I just remember like, okay, I'll just add this in here because they really tried to make a compelling case. I don't understand this one too much because they were trying to make the argument. So Saccharum Sara, or sugarcane, several authors have identified Saccharum Sara, a variety of sugarcane that grows near lakes, as a source of Vedic Soma, or with an ancient variety of sugarcane that may be presently extinct. So the person I was talking to was making the argument that if you've never had refined sugar, or you've never had sugar that could give you that stimulant-y effect, and I guess I see what they're saying, but at the same time, it doesn't account for immortality, attaining light, communing with the gods. Like, there's just so many other things. Like, you wouldn't revere sugar like that, in my opinion. And then the other thing is they're saying that It could be a variety of sugarcane that may be extinct. As I mentioned before, maybe there's some flora we're not aware of, or maybe some flora that was around that's no longer around. There's, or maybe it's something cool that we don't even know about anymore. That's a possibility too. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm not going to make a case for this one. I just wanted to put it out there because I thought it was interesting, but not really lining up for me. And then this is the last slide, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we just went through. So, Swami Rama's Soma experience. In his autobiography, Swami Rama recalls contacting an Indian herbologist and Vedic scholar named Vajja Bhavadat, sorry if I'm butchering that, who is described as the only living authority on Soma. He comes to visit the Swami, bringing about a pound of herb with him. He informs the Swami that through the plant's effects can be likened to that of psychedelic mushrooms. It is definitely not a mushroom, but rather a succulent plant. He convinces the Swami to join him in partaking in the Soma. The taste, Swami Rama says, is a little bitter and sour. He becomes inebriated and dances wildly, claiming he is Shiva. Several students attempt to restrain apparently slightly built Bhadravridat and were able to do so. Meanwhile, Swami Rava develops a crippling headache, a symptom which is compatible with the effects of ephedrine overdose. No hallucinogenic effects were described by Swami Rama. So, again, it's an interesting anecdote, but I don't see. I've looked through videos too. Like I specifically looked for people from these regions making videos on these topics, and there's really not too much out there. So I don't even know if any of these real traditions, like Soma from the Rig Veda or Soma from the Avesta or Homa from the Avesta, have really actually survived. I will say this: if you look at the architecture from the Vedic cultures, if you look at the architectures from Iran, it's very fractally. I mean, look at some of those old mosques they're like the craziest, most beautiful fractals you've ever seen. Very similar to a 5-HT2A receptor style psychedelic, whether DMT, mushrooms, whatever. So if you look at the thing, and there are other, I have heard some other anecdotes of, some of the more esoteric traditions from ancient Iran and stuff, practicing more like alchemy style stuff. And, maybe we can, I don't know, I can ask P.D. Newman when we get him back on about that, because he might have something to say about that. But yeah, look at those beautiful ancient mosques and the fractals there, and even like churches for that matter. Like look at, stained glass and all that. Like a lot of this stuff is reflective of these like transcendent experiences that I don't know how they would achieve that by just day-to-day consciousness, because I've never had anything like that. And you could say it's just art or whatever. I don't believe that one bit. Because, I've done experiments too where maybe you take a little bit of psilocybin and you look at pictures of these mosques or something. There's something going on there that, and people will know what I'm talking about. When you focus, there's like a weird focus thing that happens on psilocybin, and it like draws you in. And that definitely happens when you look at these pictures of these mosques and stuff. So, but look, I don't have any answers. I gave my opinions on what's happening. Yeah. It's one of those things where that's why it's a mystery, right? I've heard lots of people talk about it. It's definitely, to be honest with you, there's not that many people that have gone that deep. I'm not saying I just went the deepest, because again, you have Chris Bennett, who's done tons of research. You have Matthew Clark. You have all these people that have written books and stuff on it. But yeah, I think, again, cannabis probably most likely with a runner-up of a Middle Eastern ayahuasca analog. And then I have my hypothesis, which is that it's the ritual mixed with any entheogen. Doesn't matter what the entheogen is, as long as you can get into that altered state. That's the most important aspect of it. So, yeah, so we'll leave it there for now. I had this episode ready to roll for a long time. We just never got to it through having guests on and me almost dying twice and just stuff like that. But I'm glad we got it in. Let me know what you think. If there's another candidate that I'm just not even thinking of, I would love to hear it. I think we went through pretty much all of, like, the reasonable ones that I could find, and even a couple unreasonable ones. But yeah, I mean, I love this stuff. I love talking about this stuff. I totally nerd out about it. Like, who else would make a slideshow about all of this stuff? Like, I made all those graphics, I made the map, I made all that stuff. So, yeah, I appreciate everybody listening too, because, in terms of, lots of action tonight on the boards, which I love. And, I want to do more of this too. These are the style episodes we used to do all the time, and I kind of got away from it. I have my son, he's getting a little bit older, and, we go into school and stuff, so it'll be a little bit easier to kind of fit in some time with stuff. But, yeah, we're going to do more episodes like this, more guest episodes. And if there's anything that we used to hit on that you like that we've done in the past, or guests or anything like that, totally let me know. You can send me a email at mindescapepodcast@gmail.com. I want to remind everybody that the website is done for. It wasn't really being utilized. We weren't really getting much traffic. So if you need anything, just go to the link tree. The link tree link's down below. And everything's on there. So if you need anything. And yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. Check out Chris Bennett's books, Liber 420, his book on Soma, the Soma solution. Check out Matthew Clark's book, Botanical Ecstasies. And both of those interviews, part 1 and part 2, are linked down below. I have both the YouTube and the Spotify versions. Both have video. So if you want to watch or listen. And yeah, I think that's it. We're going to wrap it up here. But love the topic. Glad to finally get it out there. And again, I want feedback. If somebody's got something interesting to add to this, or whether it's anecdotal, or they read something else, or there's another piece of the puzzle I'm missing, love to hear it. I mean, I love being wrong, or like learning new things, I'm just trying to put what I think is the most credible stuff out there, but there's probably cool stuff that I don't even know about. But anyways, that's it. Again, you want to support Mind Escape, leave us a nice review. We really appreciate it. We also have our Linktree, Patreon, merch store. Check out our documentary. Tons of stuff on there. I'm trying to get Maurice back on here soon too. I might have to whoop his ass, get him back on, but we'll figure that out. And that's it. I just want to say I appreciate all the kindness and support and everybody reaching out to me after my recent brush with death, and I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to say thank you all, and I love you. And we're going to end this the same way we end all episodes, which is we love you. Stay safe out there, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.